Welcome to African Diary 24, the channel where Africa speaks for itself. From powerful stories and rich cultures to political realities and grassroots movements, we bring you content that informs, inspires, and challenges the narrative. Whether you're here to learn, connect, or explore, you're in the right place. This is Africa, unfiltered, unapologetic, and rising. Hit that subscribe button and become part of the journey. Disclaimer. The content featured on African Diary 24 is for informational, educational, and documentary purposes only. We aim to represent stories with accuracy and integrity, but the views expressed in interviews or commentary do not necessarily reflect those of the channel. We do not promote hate, violence, or political bias. Viewer discretion is advised, especially for sensitive topics. Always do your own research and think critically.
If you thought the scenes from France were bad, then hold onto your seats, because what we're about to show you is straight out of a horror movie. Here in Kenya, the youth are dying in the streets, and the world needs to see why. But this story goes deeper than headlines suggest. I've spent weeks researching what's really happening behind the scenes. From the suspicious death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody to the government's desperate tactics to silence dissent. The forensic evidence tells a chilling story that police tried to cover up. 4 days ago, at least 16 more young Kenyans were gunned down by police during protests marking the anniversary of last year's parliament storming. The demonstrations turned violent as some protesters stormed and set fire to the National Assembly, forcing lawmakers to abandon the bill after President Ruto's win was nullified due to irregularities. The country's Supreme Court paved the way for a fresh vote between Ruto and Odinga. Now, while the court upheld the election process, it made significant changes to the Electoral Commission, including replacing its chairman, Wafula Chebukati. Following the ruling, Odinga withdrew his presidential bid, citing concerns about the Electoral Commission's credibility. This decision raised questions about the transparency and fairness of the electoral process in Kenya and the influence of external factors on the outcome of the elections. Eyewitnesses have painted a grim picture of the unfolding events in Nairobi. It's scary to witness such brutality firsthand, they said. The police are not holding back. They are shooting directly at the protesters, and it seems like they do and care about the consequences. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki defended the police actions, claiming that they were necessary to restore order. Kenyan opposition figures are demanding action against those responsible for the violence, including Interior Principal Secretary Raymond Omalo and Inspector General of Police Jafekum. The international community has urged all parties to seek a peaceful resolution to the crisis and engage in dialogue to address the root causes of the unrest. However, it remains to be seen whether the government is willing to compromise and find common ground with the opposition. They accuse the government of deploying the police as a tool to suppress dissent and maintain control. What are your thoughts on the escalating unrest in Kenya? If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Stay informed, stay engaged. Thank you for watching. Do you think the government is using excessive force to quell the protests? And how can the international community help bring about a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. We value your input and encourage open discussions on pressing global issues. Let's continue the conversation. The opposition has threatened to escalate the protests if their demands are not met. He also announced a ban on demonstrations in the capital, but this has only served to intensify the protests. Many see the ban as an attempt to silence dissent and prevent the public from exercising their right to peaceful assembly and protest. And, until that is repaired, the cycle of violence and unrest is likely to continue. The people of Kenya deserve better. They deserve a government that respects their rights, protects their security, and works to improve their lives. The current administration must be held accountable for its actions and strive to create a more just and equitable society for all Kenyans. Failure to do so will only lead to further instability and suffering. Such accounts provide a first-hand glimpse into the harrowing reality faced by civilians caught in the crossfire of this violent unrest. The coming days will be crucial in determining whether the government can restore order or whether the protests will continue to spiral out of control. One thing is certain, though, the people of Kenya have shown remarkable courage and resilience in the face of adversity. Despite the violence and intimidation, they continue to demand justice, accountability, and a better future for their country. The world should stand in solidarity with them as they fight for a brighter tomorrow. Their testimonies serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of the ongoing conflict and the urgent need for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. According to those on the ground, the situation is dire. Police are using excessive force to disperse protesters, often resorting to live ammunition instead of rubber bullets. This has resulted in a worrying number of casualties, with protesters bearing the brunt of the violence. Despite withdrawing the controversial bill, the government proceeded to arrest dozens of opposition leaders, including former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Blogger Albert Ojwang, a vocal critic of the government, was arrested by the police. However, he was later found dead under mysterious circumstances. The United Nations has condemned the police violence, urging restraint and respect for fundamental rights. In a statement released on January, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed deep concern over the deteriorating situation in Nairobi. The statement reads in part, "I am deeply concerned by the excessive use of force by law enforcement officials in the context of the ongoing protests in Nairobi, which has resulted in a high number of casualties, including deaths." The UN called on Kenyan authorities to conduct prompt, impartial, and independent investigations into all incidents of excessive force and to hold those responsible accountable. Additionally, the UN urged the government to ensure that law enforcement officials exercise restraint and refrain from using live ammunition unless strictly necessary in self-defense or the defense of others against an imminent threat of death or serious injury. Odinga called for fresh protests following the death of 2 young men in police custody. The government accuses the opposition of orchestrating the unrest to destabilize the country. But Odinga insists that the protests are a spontaneous response to police brutality and the high cost of living. His body bore signs of torture, including a fractured skull and missing teeth, sparking public outrage and allegations of police brutality. The government denied the allegations, but the controversy surrounding Ojwang's death continues to fuel tensions and distrust between the government and its citizens. The situation remained tense. Odinga's supporters continued to protest his detention. As the world watched in horror, the city descended into chaos. Unfortunately, it's probably a bit of both. The opposition has undoubtedly capitalized on public discontent to push their agenda. Meanwhile, the government's heavy-handed tactics have only served to escalate the violence and deepen the divide between the ruling class and the people they were supposed to serve. On Monday, protesters set fire to a courthouse, torching the very building meant to dispense justice. The iconic Kenyatta International Conference Center was also not spared as protesters vented their frustrations. And Tuesday was even worse. At least 20 people were killed when police opened fire on demonstrators. It's been a bloody week in the streets of Nairobi, And is there any hope for a peaceful resolution to the crisis? Well, let's break it down for you. It all started when the government attempted to introduce new taxes, which many saw as a way to make ordinary citizens bear the brunt of an economic crisis. The proposed Finance Bill 2023 suggested hefty tax increases on essential goods and services. For example, it proposed a 16% tax on fuel, cement and gas cylinders, as well as a 30% tax on all digital transactions. This move sparked outrage among Kenyans who were already struggling to cope with the rising cost of living. For many, it brought back painful memories of last year's anti-government protests. But what triggered these violent demonstrations? The current unrest stems from deep-rooted frustration over police brutality and the high cost of living. On July last year, hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets of Nairobi and other major cities to voice their opposition to the bill. But then came a shocking turn of events on August 11, 2023, during the repeat of the presidential election. And then came the horrifying incident on September 20, 2023, that shook the nation. Fast forward to January 2024, and the situation has escalated once again. So, what's the truth? Are these protests a calculated move by the opposition, or a genuine outcry by citizens fed up with police brutality and the soaring cost of living? In the midst of this chaos, one thing is clear: civilian lives are hanging in the balance. One eyewitness, who wished to remain anonymous for security reasons, described the scene as terrifying. As the protests continue to escalate, the international community has taken notice. Now, the government has responded to the UN's call for accountability, but its response has done little to quell the growing unrest. Amidst the chaos, calls for justice and accountability are growing louder. As the situation in Nairobi continues to deteriorate, the world is watching anxiously. You see, trust has broken down between the government and the people. And as the world watches, the situation in Nairobi remains fluid and unpredictable. Now, here's the thing: we want to hear from you. Also, before you go, please don't forget to subscribe for updates on our latest videos.